The nation's debt burden is on track to surpass its historic high point in a decade, reaching 107% of the gross domestic product, also known as GDP, by 2031, according to a new report from the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, also known as the CBO. The debt surpassed 100% of the GDP growth last year for the first time since World War II, when it peaked at 106%. The CBO projected that based on current law, the debt would continue to mount, surpassing 200% of GDP by 2051. The economists had roundly agreed that the deficit spending during economic emergencies is a good policy, but they warned that deficits should be brought under control during a sunnier economic times to avoid the negative consequences down the road. Debt that high is and rising as a percentage of GDP boosts federal and private borrowing costs, and it slows the growth of economic output and increases interest payments abroad. The report said a growing debt burden would increase the risk of a fiscal crisis and higher inflation, as well as undermine the confidence in the U.S. dollar, making it more costly to finance public and private activity in international markets. The cost of servicing the debt alone are set to grow dramatically over time, surpassing discretionary spending on both defense and domestic programs in just over 20 years, and the entirety of the Social Security shortly thereafter. The warnings about major debt increases are playing a role in the debate around President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has repeatedly argued that the risks of spending too much are far lower than the risks of not spending enough and allowing the economy to flounder. That, she says, would both result in a weaker economy and leave the country in a tougher position for addressing the debt for later on. The Republicans argue that the price tag is too large in the bill and not well targeted enough to justify because of the economic conditions alone. But with our nation moving toward a dangerous future of increased inflation, President Biden and Democrats in Congress insist on pushing the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 spending bill that funds the Democratic priorities while hiking our federal debt to nearly $30 million. And this is what Senator Rick Scott, the dumbass, said from Thursday, but he's never right in anything because he's a fucking moron. The partisan actions of congressional Democrats and the Biden administration have real life consequences for Americans. No, that was Trump's administration, so think again, dumbass. The Democrats are quick to note that the GOP supported a $1.9 trillion tax cut when the economy was already humming along, and that was under the former squatter Donald Trump. The deficit rose from $666 billion to just shy of $1 trillion, and the debt expanded significantly. But the budget watchdogs, however, say the pandemic should not be an excuse to ignore the debt altogether. We shouldn't shy away from borrowing what's needed to end this pandemic and support the recovery and help sustain households and businesses throughout this crisis, said Maya McGinnis, who's the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, calling the report's findings an air raid siren. But along the way, we can't afford to ignore the long term of what might happen.